Let's talk about, what a product manager is. In very, very simple terms, and I think you would have seen this at multiple places every time you try to think about product management, it's a role, it's a discipline that sits between business, customer, and technology, right? It is that connective tissue between all these three, high-level aspects of a company, right? A product manager acts as a mini CEO of the product. So at any point of time, even if your product is one of the 100 products that the company has, if you are a product manager, you are pretty much acting as a mini CEO, thinking about everything right from the product itself, to marketing, to sales, to people associated with it, to internal and external connections and everything associated, right? Collaborates with the cross-functional group and leads without authority. We talked about that, leads or influences without authority. Determines the answers to the top 4 questions that you see there. There are a lot more questions that comes in the way of a product manager, but these are the top ones, right? Who are we building for? Who are our customers, right? At any point of time, as a product manager, you're not building for everyone, right? The first step is figuring out who are we targeting. Are we targeting recent college graduates? Are we targeting salaried people and things like that? Why are we building it? Is there a problem that we are trying to solve? What is that problem? What does a solved problem look like? So what does that success look like? And what is the opportunity there? And once you find that opportunity, what are we building? How are we solving that opportunity, right? How are we solving that problem? And finally, how will we measure, or how will we launch after we, and how will we measure after we launch? Trying to understand, did we even go in the right direction when we planned and strategized and prioritized and implemented and collaborated and did all of it? Did we go in the right direction, and is it yielding the results that it's supposed to yield? Or did we get some new information that now determines how we move about next, right? And finally, it is responsible for the end-to-end product lifecycle management of the product that this person is dealing with. If you think about a product manager, or day-to-day life of a product manager looks like this, right? A product manager deals with most of the activities, or a combination of these activities that you would see right up there. A product manager goes through a life cycle while building a product or determining what to build and actually building it. The first one being product strategy. So what is product strategy? When you talk about product strategy, in simple terms, it is, what am I doing next? Sometimes that strategy is, what am I doing, or what are we doing for the next few months, few years, few quarters, right? So it starts with everything in a product life cycle starts with the voice of customer. Depending on what phase your product is, that voice of customer can start with, oh, I'm building something really new. I need to reach out to my target customers or possible target customers. 2, I have a really sophisticated product sitting out there that has gone through multiple iterations, and now I need to understand what I should do next, right? Everywhere, the voice of customer is the key, right? The next thing that is used by the product manager is some analysis on what the market is, where the market is heading, where the competitors are heading, and where should the business direction be? Why should the product direction be, right? Determines the product roadmap. The product roadmap looks like a journey. Who all here have seen that, a smart art in Excel that goes like an arrow, like that goes up on the top, and then you have a timeline and things like that, right? A product roadmap, think of a product roadmap of a similar kind, where you're talking about, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I plan to do in the near future. This is what I think we should do in the mid-future or mid-term of the future. And this is where I want to be in the long term, right? And as you go farther in the future, the details are high level. What you have right now is much more granular. And finally, what product strategy includes is objectives and key results. So when we were talking about thinking about the voice of the customer and identifying an opportunity, and I mentioned one of the things that needs to be defined here is what does success look like? And the way you define it is in two ways. The first thing is in a simple, from a customer perspective, I am facing this problem, hence I am not happy. Two, as a customer, I am no longer facing this problem because I have a solution to it, and now I am satisfied and I'm happy. And then in the product world, you would actually call that something as objectives and key results. So what I said, from the transition from not happy to happy because of the solution is your objective or the goal, right? And the key results are defined in terms of metrics. We'll talk about metrics in the monitor and measure, so the last step here. But metrics typically are the measure by which you, or the, how do I say this? Or the indicators by which you measure the success of your product. Your indicators could be, for Facebook, those indicators could be daily active user, monthly active user, right? For a different company that is, let's take PayPal. One of the key metrics would be how many of these transactions related to payments are actually getting converted. Active usage may not matter that much because what if the user is just coming to PayPal websites and just browsing and not doing anything? That's not yielding any business, right? So every business, every product has a different metric. Moving on. Once you've validated your opportunity hypothesis and figured out what exactly needs to be built, you would go into things like requirements. And requirements can range anywhere from how the design is supposed to look like, where you will collaborate with the designers and come up with the best design for the product, to coming up with use cases, functional and non-functional requirements. Functional requirements meaning this is how the product should operate. When I click here, it should go here. When the user submits it, these checks should be done are all functional requirements. And when you go into levels of non-functional requirements saying, I need X thousand or X million transactions to be processed in a second, those are all non-functional requirements. I need to scale. I need this particular product to scale to 2x in the future. Those things contribute to the non-functional requirements. You will also take a lot of stakeholder feedback. So while you're doing somewhere between your opportunity identification, validation, and requirements, you would be talking to a lot of stakeholders, and you would understand their input, their feedback, and get their inputs and figure out how their inputs impacts your product. Somebody might come and ask a question and say, hey, sounds like a great idea. Do you want to charge our customers? And that would actually send you on another track where you will now try and figure out, am I going to price this product? If yes, who all I need to involve and how do I need to work? That's just one example of how a stakeholder input can determine the direction of how the end product gets built. Finally, now that the requirements are ready, a product manager would go ahead and have regular coordination with engineers based on what methodology is being followed. It would be Agile Scrum, or if it is just a waterfall model, then the product manager would actually detail out the use cases in a PRD, or a product requirements document, and will work with the engineers to actually get it built. It's let me think about this. Yeah, the concept of we have written the requirements and now it's gone to the engineers and now they'll go ahead and develop it is actually not the right one, right? There is daily coordination, daily check-in required between a product manager and the engineering team that the product manager belongs to, is a part of. You would be doing daily check-ins. You would be responding to their queries as a product manager. And you would also, in terms of a daily check-in, would be signing off on the demo. So after an engineer develops something, there is a part, or there is one of these ceremonies in the product life cycle where they demo what work is done, right? So signing off on demo is also one of those things. Assuming the product is ready now, the next thing to be thought about is the launch strategy. How will you market the product? What is our PR strategy? What if somebody writes about your product on the internet? How are we going to react to it? How are we going to get our customer support team ready to understand what the new product or the new feature was so that if anybody calls, they are able to better answer it? And finally, when the product gets launched, what is required is to monitor and measure the product. So typically, I tend to use two terms, monitor and measure. The difference between the two that I feel is a very important difference is when you monitor something, you're making sure it is working right? When you measure something, you're trying to find out what results it is getting me. They are two different things. In monitoring, it is either working right or not working right. And if it's not working right, then there has to be steps figured out how to make it work right, how to fix that problem, right? Measurement is what is the data or the key performance indicators that you're tracking to. So that's pretty much the product life cycle. And at any point of time, a product manager would need a combination of these skill sets and then some more to be able to do a good job as a product manager. The top one being customer empathy. The customer is always right, sits at the top of everything that you are thinking about, all your strategies. Strong business acumen. Now that you know what our customers need, how do you pair that up with where you want your business to go, what the values, mission, vision of your business are, so that they all jive well with each other. Knack of prioritization, knowing what to build. You will always have 1,000 things in your list. So what is the first thing we are building and why? Data savviness. We talked about monitor and measure when you get so much information, or even from any analysis that a product manager is doing through marketing data, or through customer data analysis, or through competitor data analysis. How do you take all of this data and digest it in such a way that you're able to comprehend something out of it? Is very, very important. Technical understanding, since we're talking about software product management, there's a little bit of understanding of, hey, what's an API? Why do we need to call this API? What's a database? Where does the data get stored? What are the events? And little things about how your product works is also important. Excellent communication skills. In a product manager role, a product manager gets to talk to or present to or convince anywhere from a peer to the VP or at times the C-suite level executives of the organization, right? So how do you talk based on the audience that you have, and how do you do that really well is important. Leadership. This is the kind of leadership where nobody's reporting to you, but you're still their leader. You're still causing that excitement to get everybody on this together so that you can deliver this awesome product. And finally, crisis and conflict management. There's always going to be crisis, and there's always going to be conflict. If you keep a cool head, you'll be the one sorting them out. All right, with that, ask me anything. All right, questions?
So think about the product management role from company to company. Could you describe the difference there, whether it's different products you work on, but also just the environment there?
Absolutely. So the question was the different product management roles that I've had from company to company and the difference of work there and the environment there. So I'll just start with the first one. I'll just go in the ascending order. So the first product management gig that I had was as a contractor. It was at a company called twinspires.com. It is an online portal for wagering on horse races. And I was building their payments platform. So I've been in payments all this while. But that was my first transition into product management. Before that, I had done things like business analysis, which sometimes we mistake for being same as product management, but not really. So in there, it was a small company, and they were still figuring out what product management was, what Agile Scrum was. So my role actually evolved with the evolution of the understanding of the company. and my responsibility was just figuring out how to build that overall payments platform. So what that meant was, when you think about the user is not coming to the website for that payments platform. Anytime the user wants to do something related to depositing money in their TwinSpires account so that they can bet on horse races, the depositing money is just one step, and they want that to be as frictionless, as quick as possible, right? So my responsibilities were just figuring out how to make that happen, and because it's payments, how to avoid fraud there, because if money is gone, it's gone, it's a loss, right? All my work included just presenting in a forum called a product council, where I would present my ideas and say, this is what I think we should do next. Everybody would present their ideas, and the product council would approve, ask for more information, or just deprioritize something. So I was just a product manager there. In an agile Scrum world, there is a concept of a product manager and a chief product manager. So at times, the prioritization decisions happen at the chief product manager level. So that was a small company, and it was very easy to manage Agile Scrum there because everybody knew what was on the other person's roadmap. So if I had a fellow product manager who I needed some help from, I would just totally talk about that in the product council meeting, get us aligned, and things just worked out smooth. So that was the kind of culture because it was a very small company. My next gig was in PayPal. I was in the core payments team in PayPal, so I was just integrating with the vendor so that any payment can be processed, or any kind of payments can be processed in PayPal. So I was in their card side of payment processing. So there my role was, though I was a card payment product owner or product manager, my role initially started with building a platform. So that platform was like an internal tool, which was like a rule engine for all different customers, internal customers to build on. So that's how I started my journey in PayPal. A company like PayPal has very small or very small breaks in the teams, meaning very distributed teams. So anytime you're thinking about an end-to-end product, you're pretty much talking to 10 to 15 teams to try and get work done. And when I talk about 10 to 15 teams, I'm not even talking about just marketing or legal and such stakeholders. 10 to 15 product teams, because if you're trying to build something or if you're trying to launch something on web or on mobile, there's a different product owner for web, different product owner for mobile. If you're trying to do something because it's payments, there is a concept of risk. So there's a different risk team person. So you're working with different product managers to get the work done. In terms of culture, this at times led to a little bit of chaos because there's a lot of teams. But we have to think of it in this way. The bigger the size of the company, these little chunks of product management teams will exist. And how do you go about understanding what your stakeholders are, who are the different teams that you need to deal with, and how do you collaborate with them in such a way that everybody has been informed of what's going on and can provide their valuable input is the key. My current role is in Intuit. I'm again a part of the payments team there. Intuit, I just heard this today, that Intuit is like a 32-year-old startup, and that's the kind of culture there is there. It's a big company, but somehow it has managed to retain itself as groups of little companies, so it becomes easy. So I get the feeling of going back to the TwinSpires culture where it's easy to manage and talk to the teams. That was a really long answer, but hope that helped. Yeah, go ahead. Great question. So the question is, when I said product teams, does it mean teams of multiple product managers or engineers working on a product? So typically when we talk about a product team, think about a team that is focused on a certain product. And that team includes the product manager. If you're following Agile Scrum methodology, it also includes say a scrum master or a program manager or a project manager, and then you have engineers in the team. And depending on if you deal with a front-end product or not, or user experience-based product or not, you may or may not have a design team with it. So a UX designer or a content designer based on that. So think of that as one team. I don't know if you guys have heard about this term of 3 in a box and 4 in a box. So typically when they, sorry? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so typically when they say something like that, it actually means product, engineering, and design in a box, meaning one big team. There are 3 different disciplines, but they're a part of one big team. And that's how you would define one product team. Yeah. All right, I'll let you go because you had a question originally.
So, kind of in each section of the roadmap, one of the recurring themes seemed to be like customer feedback. And I was wondering like how that actually looks. I mean, like, are you cold calling customers? Are you like, and I'm sure it depends on the type of product or it depends on the size of the company. But I'm kind of curious because every single stage you're getting that customer feedback. How do you actually get out in the middle and kind of do that?
Great question. So the question is, it seems like customer feedback is integral to each stage of product management. How does that look and how do we get that? So I'm going to try and answer this in terms of each phase of product management. First one being figuring out what to do, right? Or what to do next, wherever your product, in whatever stage your product is, right? So when you talk about that, the first thing is to figure out what your customer wants. So one of the ways to find that out is finding out probable customers. So when you thought of building this next thing or finding out the next opportunity or the opportunity for your product, you would figure out who are you trying to solve this for, right? And you will try to find out those prospective customers. If you're building an app that's helping students figure out their career path, students are your prospective customers, right? So you'd reach out to students, interview them, and try and understand. You could also try and take a survey and put it on Facebook and try to get all your student friends answer that for you to try and understand what is the feel among the people that you tried to reach out, right? That's how you would try and figure out the first level of it. So if you already have a product where you already have customers and you're trying to figure out what to do next, how to solve a problem for them, what you would do is you would reach out to those people. And if you're trying to solve a certain problem that you can actually figure out through data that this person has abandoned the transaction or abandoned the session in this step, and hence I understand that this person faced the problem that I'm trying to fix, you would actually try and find out all those people, reach out to them and interview them and try and understand what happened. So that's during the opportunity mining phase, right? Once you've figured out what is your opportunity, there's also a concept of validating your opportunity. You may want to, again, interview the customers with the opportunity solution that you've had during that phase 2. So now you've figured out what to build, now you've built it, right? Now, and you've launched it, this is where the other side of customer feedback comes in, right? So you will try and understand what they are saying and what they are not saying. You will try and understand what they are saying, very simple things that you can use to find out what your customers are saying about your product through. Give me a hint here. What's the one way that you can find out what your customers are saying about their product? Assume your product is an app. Sorry? Reviews, App Store reviews, right? Or any reviews for that matter. These days there's Google reviews, there's Yelp, there's Quora reviews. Just reviews are a good way of not even going to look for feedback and just getting the feedback, right? The other things, when I said what they are saying versus what they are not saying is also from customer behavior. When you look at data and you try to figure out how many people tried to use it and did not finish it, how many abandoned it, that says something about the customer behavior. Again, this is incomplete information because you know what happened, you don't know why it happened, right? So you would try and reach out to these customers again and try and figure out what happened with them and what problems they face. So everywhere you would try and figure out these customer feedback, Sometimes, and this depends from company to company, at least Intuit likes to actually call customers and just interview them. And you know, based on the opportunity, sometimes they would just interview them as is for the product and say, I just wanted to get an understanding. Are you still happy with it? Do you see any friction? Can we fix something? Right? It's just information that you would get from customer. Did that answer your question? All right, go ahead.
So when you decided that you wanted to make a transition from business analyst to product manager, what kind of things did you do to convince the hiring manager that you were the right person? And also, what suggestions do you have for people who want to make that transition?
Sure. Those are two different answers.
Yeah.
Because I was, there's a term called accidental product manager. I was an accidental product manager. I had no idea what product management was. I used to feel it's the same as business analysis, right? So I tried my hand at business analysis, and I wanted to try something different. So there's a company called Cognizant. It's a service industry-based company in India. So I was working there in their business development group, where I would be the person responsible for responding to RFPs. And so RFP is a request for proposal. When a client wants you to do some work as a company, you would actually create a proposal and tell them this is how I would do it, these are the people I would put, this is what I would charge, and why am I the better person to do it, right? So different companies would provide that information. So I did that for Cognizant, and when the RFP for Twinspires came and I worked on it, and when you think about an RFP response or a proposal, the biggest, most important section is the solution. How are you trying to fix, or how are you trying to provide an answer to the problem that the RFP created? So I worked on it, and I worked on it a little bit hard. That way, the account manager noticed it, and one of the requirements in that RFP was that of a product manager. So he asked me if I would like to be a part of it, since I've already invested my time in figuring out about the company, their pain points, and what they would like to do next. So that was a gig in a sister company of Twinspires.com. Like when you bet on horse races, you need to look at reports. Like seasoned horse race wagerers know how to look at those reports, read, and understand which horses to bet on. So it was to figure out a next generation format of that particular website called Brisnet.com. So I started with just a product strategy work for 4 months there, and then I transitioned to product management into overall Twinspires.com. So, but when I was doing that, I just realized that I found my true calling. Till then, I was just hopping from one career to the other to figure out what I want to do in my life, and I realized this is it. Now, answering your next question. If you're transitioning from a non-product manager role to a product manager role, the chances are you've really done one of the things that we just saw in the previous slides. You've done something of this. You have put yourself really close to the customer and tried to understand their pain points and tried to put a lens of customer first and how do I fix this, forgetting that, oh, I am just a data analyst, or I'm just an engineer, or I'm just in marketing. You've gone beyond that, and you've tried to understand how do I fix this problem. I would say highlight that. One of the other things that you could do, I don't know who all here are already taking a product school session, but if you're taking a product school session, there is a project that gets done in the 8 weeks of the product school sessions that happen, or cohorts that happen. That final project is also a very, very good way. So at least the cohort that I am teaching, they all have picked their dream company, and they have done a final project on that company, right? So once they have done that, now if you're trying to approach somebody saying, hey, I would like to be in your product team, you can now talk about, I also analyzed your company and your product, and I have something to share, right? That gives you an edge than just cold emailing anybody, right? And one of the most important things that I want to say is the easiest way to get a product manager role switch is in your own company, right? So try to find opportunities like that. Yeah.
Do you think getting an MBA will help you in terms of being able to reach your product management?
I don't have an MBA degree, so I don't think it's necessary. It is definitely necessary that you understand things like customer empathy and knowing how to prioritize things. So the short answer is no. However, you would see some companies that insist that a product manager job description says MBA is a requirement. If that is your dream company, you may want to evaluate whether you would like to do that or not. But before you go ahead and invest time and money in that, I would actually try and reach out to somebody in there to try and understand how much of an important requirement this is. Yes.
So I have an MBA, and I work at the government before, right? It's a waste of money if that's what you're trying to do. But I do know that there are companies that need to have a computer science. That's what I find more often. It's technical degree, it's more for the requirements.
Right. And so what that gentleman just said was he also feels that MBA is not required, but he feels that computer science degree is a requirement. To some, for some companies, yes. Absolutely. For some companies, you're correct. It's software product management, and if you're dealing with a very technical product management kind of a role, then yes, you would probably need to know things about software development a little bit. I mean, some companies do expect that the product managers know how to code, but that's rare. Like Google may expect that, but I have not heard about other companies that expect that. Yes.
Building on that, how important do you think engineering mindset, whereas you know the engineering constraints, would help you in your role? I mean, because like you, I think a lot of people come from a business analysis background, and sometimes they might not know the software engineering constraints. Wanted to get your thoughts on when you talk to the engineers, how would they usually take that?
So the question is, how important do you think knowing the engineering concepts in detail is important, or just high level?
High level.
The high level engineering concepts.
I mean, being in an engineering role, if you have that experience, that would help you.
If you if you already have an engineering experience in a team where you want to be a product manager, of course that would help you, because you know how the product is built, you know the nitty-gritties of your product. So that is definitely helpful, because in a way you have seen the end-to-end of a product. Of course from an engineer's perspective, but that learning curve is gone, right? So that was for knowing something in detail about an existing product. The other question being knowing high-level engineering concepts. They are definitely helpful. Even if at times, you may get through the interview, it just makes your transition into this role super easy. One of the key things that's required as a product manager is to build that rapport with engineers. And knowing those high-level engineering concepts help you understand what they're trying to say. When they come back and say, no, I cannot do it right now because of this reason. And if you understand what this reason is, by the way, that does not mean that if you don't understand, you shouldn't ask. You should totally ask. But if you have a little bit of idea of what this person means, you may ask some clarifying questions, but that person will understand, you get it. You get what I'm saying, right? So I would say little bit of engineering concepts, of course, they're super important. Just high level, not too deep. Of course, when you start dealing with your own product, it's good to understand how your product is integrated, how your product is implemented, because you are going to be the face of your team when you talk with the different product managers who say, can you do this for me? And you want to be able to say, of course, do not speak for the engineers, but you want to be able to say, yeah, is it possible or not? So that gives you a little bit of edge where you would talk about, hey, this is not possible because our systems are not built that way. Things like that. Yes? So you want to know the ladder to being a product manager in a technical company. There is no one defined way. But since you said technical company, I'm assuming you're trying to go in a technical product management role? Or okay. So just for everybody's benefit, there could be different kinds of product manager roles, right? You could have a normal general product manager role. You could have a technical product manager role. Sometimes there is a chance that there is also a general product manager and a technical product manager, and they together work on the overall product. They have their different teams, but one builds the back end, one builds the front end. There is a possibility like that, right? And sometimes in the general product manager role, you may actually, while building front end, be very design focused, user experience focused, content focused. Think about how do I launch in different countries. On the other side, you are very much technical focused and figuring out how do I do my integrations, where do I store this data. So to answer your specific question about technical product management, there is no defined way, but I could talk about the few ways that I can think about. One is just being a part of the engineering team, right? And being a product manager of the same team or a related team. That's one way to get there. Another way to get there is being an expert at something. And I'm thinking about what technical things you could be an expert on. So we have things related to machine learning, AI coming up so much, right? You could be an expert on the engineering side of it, but it would work really well for you to be a product manager on those side of things, because I personally don't know anything about it, but I just feel that I kind of need to know the very technical concepts of it to become a product manager there, right? The other thing you could do, which is not related to knowing the technical aspects, is maybe think about going into a rotational product manager program somewhere where nobody is looking at whether you already have this experience or not, but they are looking at, do you have the understanding of what it takes to become a product manager? Do your rotational product management and do it in such a way that you actually end up in a technical team. So those are some different ways. Of course, there are other ways that I may not be able to think of right now, but there's different ways to go into technical product management job. But best thing is to think about when you say technical product manager, what field, what part of that technical, the opportunity that you want to go to. Narrowing that down should help. Okay, he was first. Let me just get him. Yeah.
So kind of building on some of the topics that we talked about, transitioning to a PM role, I'm coming from more of a UX research design type. Is there something like a portfolio or slide decks, or I guess what do you show that you actually have these kind of skills to the prospective person? What's kind of like what do you show on saying, hey, I did this project? Is there like a portfolio or slide deck? How do you show those skills?
So it's a great, see, if you're a UX designer, it's a great idea to anyway have your portfolio, because if you think about product management, a lot of it is figuring out how to solve a customer problem. A lot of it gets done in the UX and a designer world as well. So the product manager collaborates with the designer to get all of these things figured out. So it's a good idea to have your portfolio as well. But it is also a good idea that if you're actually pitching yourself to somebody about a product management job, you emphasize on the product management aspect of it. You emphasize what out of it was related to product management, and that, which is why you feel you're very aligned to the role that you're looking for. This also means that if you have this background, your chances of transitioning to a product manager for a product that is front-end focused, user experience focused, is higher than a technical product manager who builds APIs, right? Yeah. I'll get him first. Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a question like it's an established fact that like a product manager takes care of so many things. Like so, one question I had is like, what are the tools that in your experience that you have used to like control the chaos that is going on? So like the tools could be like Microsoft Excel or maybe say Tableau. So like some of the tools that a product manager uses.
Okay. I'll talk about, every product manager has their own way of figuring things out. I'll talk about my strategy. And most of this strategy has come from learning it the hard way. So something that is not working, and then you figure out, I really have to fix this. Number one, your calendar, right? Everybody has a calendar. Really use it, really block time to actually work. A product manager's life is such it is full of meetings. And they are not the meetings that people put on your calendar. They are the meetings that you will schedule on people's calendars. So you can't even complain because you are setting that meeting up. But really figure that out and use your calendar in such a way that you're still able to block time for your own research. Sometimes you would want to look at data that is like that is 10,000 rows and you want to make sense of it. If you really have to do that, you cannot do that in the 5 minutes that you had between 2 meetings. That's too much context switching, right? So block time, and when you block time, do not just say blocked. Block time and figure out what you're going to do there. So plan ahead, and that will just get your work done. Otherwise, it will just pile up and it will go out of control. That's one thing. I talked about context switching, which is why it always helps. Most of the time, you are the one who is kind of driving things. So when you have a group of people and you do a meeting, I don't know who here has had a meeting where everything was fine and there were no action items and everything got figured out in that meeting. Did anybody have such a meeting ever? I have never had such a meeting. There's always action items. There's always next steps. One of the things that I have personally felt has been super helpful is to really document during the meeting. And you will eventually get a hang of doing it without losing the concentration in the meeting, and send notes right after the meeting ends. Like, don't wait for the end of the day to type up all your notes and send it. It will not get done, right? So they're not really tools, but little tricks that, before you switch to your next meeting and switch context and talk about something else, now that you're talking about this, just end it completely and give it a good end. The other things that I would say is, important things are, every company has some kind of wiki page or a Confluence page. Every time that you have an idea, start documenting it there. You may not want to share it with anyone, but anything that you're working on, as soon as you document there, as you talk to stakeholders, document their points there and put everything at one place, because now when you are at that phase where you have pretty much everything done, you kind of have one place which you can just copy a link for and send it to your stakeholders and say, review and let me know if anything else is required. That way everybody gets to see it at one place, right? So again, not a tool per se, but as a product manager, super important. Over communication is okay. No communication at times can get you into trouble, right? So sometimes you will have distribution list with 200 people on it, and you would just provide, it's more like an FYI, or keep informed distribution list, where you're saying, this happened to the product, we had this issue, this was the impact, this is how we fixed it, right? Most people may not even want to read it. Most people may put a rule on your email, right? But as soon as the key people see this, they have already absorbed what you wanted to send them, and they could ask a follow-up question. It's better to over-communicate than to miss out communicating, right? What else? Other tools that you could think about. This is, again, as a product manager, you will do a lot of PowerPoint presentations. One of the things that I've learned in Intuit, which I felt was amazing, you will not be the only one contributing to the slides. So I feel Google Slides is awesome. So collaborating in a shared documentation, whether it's Box or Google Documents, is awesome. You can have multiple people collaborate at the same time and not go into the nightmare of an email chain where 20 people are saying, my change is in red, my change is in yellow, right? Because it's difficult to collate that. Yeah, that's pretty much all I can think of right now.
So I have a question. So how does product managers finalize requirements? So do they go to their customer base and see, and write preliminary requirements, and then go to engineering and review and revise those requirements as needed, or do they just rely on engineering to create the requirements? Or how does it work in your space? How have you seen it work in other spaces as well?
Great question. So the question is, how do product managers finalize requirements? It starts with the opportunity. It starts with figuring out what I'm trying to fix, how I'll fix it. The how I'll fix it, the answer to that is just a very high level. I will fix it by introducing this feature, right? When you think about introducing this feature, you socialize that with your core team and say, I currently feel that introducing this feature needs so and so things, right? Once you have socialized this in your core team is going to tell you, is going to give you inputs that will act as a feedback. Things like one of the things that I shared. Have you thought about pricing this product? Have you thought about charging the customer for it? Or simple things like, have you thought about what will happen if the customer comes and says, I want to delete my account, right? Things like that. So think about when somebody asks you that question, how do I delete my account? Now that ends up becoming a requirement. If this is an important thing to have in your product, you will add that I have to consider this as well. Once you do that, once you socialize with the core group, you will socialize with the rest of the teams that are impacted with it. And when I say rest of the teams, they can be simple examples can be if your product is such that needs some kind of marketing, you would probably go ahead and talk to a marketing team. If you are building something where you have to figure out things like data privacy and stuff like that, you will go and talk to that legal point of contact in your company and say, I'm building this. Do you have any concerns? At least in the payments industry, you work with not only compliance people, you work with risk people and all of this, which is very payments focused. So your industry will have focused groups that will become your stakeholders, which will be the subject matter experts in your company that you will speak to. And they all will either give you their feedback or a requirement of some sort and say, I want to ensure that you put a checkbox that the user says, I agree. Only then you can take this information, right? These are just examples. So you will take all of that information, collate it, and like I was sharing with my friend here, put it in a central place and say, this is all I'm going to do right now, right? You will take the whole list and you will figure out what is absolutely required for something called as an MVP, which is minimum viable product, and say, this is what is required. So I'm going to do this right now. You will send it to all the stakeholders and they will approve and say, yes, I agree. You can do this in your initial phase. Once they agree, you will start chopping it down. If your product requires a user experience, then you would go to the designer in your team and figure out how does this user experience look like. And then you will start chopping it down into smaller requirements and take it to your engineering team. Yeah. I will take him. Yeah.
Disha, thank you for your presentation. I had a data specific question, just curious as well as wanted to see if I can get some insights into that. PayPal is, as I see, is a slightly different company than many of the other technology companies in that many of the features are not technology driven. Features such as PayPal credit card or features such as introducing free return shipping for PayPal, for payments made using PayPal. So are you as a product manager at PayPal involved in suggesting such features, or is there a separate team altogether of product managers which are involved in this? And if so, how's their day-to-day work life different from what a technical product manager like you would have?
Great question. Basically, the question is very PayPal specific, like how is the life of a product manager who deals with PayPal credit card or offering. Who's involved in suggesting these features is your first question. So typically, again, it starts with the customer problem. Sometimes, like at least in my experience in PayPal, a lot of this is driven by more customer acquisition, what's prevalent in the market. Let's say there is a certain market. Let's take India for an example. India has a concept of pay after delivery, for example. It's very market driven. That's what that market is used to, so we kind of need to introduce that feature. So there isn't a single answer there. The idea can come from anywhere. The idea can at times come from one of the people or one of the team leads in the customer support team saying, I'm getting too many calls about this. We need to do something about it. So the first term that you read on the slides that I was showing, voice of customer, is a key thing, right? So based on that, your opportunity idea can come from anywhere. There is no suggesting as such, but that's one one area from where it could come from. Sometimes people would have hackathons, and they would try and develop a proof of concept which feels like something we should go after, and that becomes a product idea. I personally do not know how did PayPal credit card and free return shipping came about, but typically it comes about mostly from customer feedback, saying our customers are asking for this, or this market is offering this, or nobody is offering this right now. All of us in the market, all competitors in the market are offering this. We could have an edge by offering this. So it starts with what's our goal? What are we trying to do? And that's how all these ideas can come about, right? It can also come about in a session where everybody's brainstorming. Typically,
So there's not really a team of more, like I would think more like finance graduates who are more business focused, because PayPal being a payments are close to finance.
so yes and no. Some of the ideas can also come from finance and say, hey, our competitor is offering this product, and they charge the customers for it. We have so many customers. If we also offer this product and start charging so and so, then this is an uplift in the revenue that we'll get. So you can get that idea from anywhere. If you're thinking about a disruptive idea that just changes everything for the company, there is a chance that that may come from an innovation team. There are dedicated innovation teams in companies that tend to see like 10 years ahead and see where is this industry going, like blockchain, cryptocurrency, and machine learning, AI, where is this going, right? And think about how our business aligns to that, or where the future of our business will be if these technologies or these concepts start becoming the norm, right? So it can come from there too. Right. I will take him first. Yeah. Product manager and product marketing manager? Okay, so the question is, what's the difference between product manager and product marketing manager? Typically, the difference between a product manager and a product marketing manager is a product manager is actually thinking about the end-to-end life cycle that we saw in those slides about launching a product. A product manager would be the end-to-end driver and the responsible person of the product, and the product marketing manager would be responsible for creating the marketing-related collaterals related to this product. So if as a product manager, you're trying to launch something and you need marketing support for it, you will approach the product marketing manager, which is going to be a partner for this, and that person would figure out how to market this product right. That being, shall we send out emails to prospective customers? Do we run an ad somewhere? Do we run a Facebook ad or a YouTube ad, or do we do a Super Bowl ad or things like that? How do we introduce this product in our homepage? Shall we make this a part of the banners that we show in the homepage and things like that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in your skills slide, you had data savviness. So I was wondering, I didn't really quite get that, and also I've seen some other postings that basically are looking for product analysts. I wonder how much of that overlaps with data savviness. About analyzing data, metrics, things like that.
So the question is data savviness and the difference between a product manager and a product analyst, if that's what you're asking, right? So let me answer the data savviness part first. Very important. At any point of time, whatever product you're dealing with, you will see numbers related to that product. The numbers could be how many people used it, how many people used it successfully, whatever those numbers are. At one point of time, there was an outage somewhere, so my product stopped working. What was the impact for those 5 seconds that my product stopped working? They are also numbers, right? So data savviness for a product manager means being able to understand what are those numbers that are important to my product. What are those performance indicators that are important to my product? And once those numbers come in front of you, how do you interpret it, right? More often than not, if you have a really solid analyst team, you will get an amazing view of everything that you were looking for. That is a very ideal case. Like I have an amazing analyst on my team, but every time that person comes with a certain view, I want some other cut in the data, right? So being able to know what I need, and sometimes also being able to do simple things like, I have this data, can I just create a pivot table and see a different view on it? Or can I drag and drop something on a report that's very easy to use and say, instead of seeing it by country, I want to see it by gender. Can I at least do that? Is the kind of data savviness that I'm talking about. That's the most basic one. The next level can be, knowing how to write an SQL, basic SQL, not replacing an analyst here, but just basic SQL to say, if somebody says, hey, today we had these many errors. So a simple SQL to say, okay, let me query today's transactions and see what happened, right? Simple things. It's not required, but it's definitely a plus. Now, the difference between a product manager and a product analyst is literally the product analyst is an analyst. That person is really talented, trying at taking lots of data and creating a format in such a way. First of all, talented enough to query all of that data from multiple data sources, putting all of it together, and then creating a picture that a product manager or other stakeholders can understand, right? They can also help you to do things like business cases, saying, if I do this, this is my cost, this is my revenue. If I do that, this is my cost, and this is my revenue. Sometimes you'll have to supply some information for them to create the cost, but to be able to give you this ROI analysis, that product analyst can help as well. So that's the difference. Looking at data is one of the things that a product manager does. Data is the product analyst's life. Yeah. Who's next? Yes.
Your experience about A/B testing from your previous companies. And second question is, what kind of software do you use for the early product planning stage?
For what?
Product planning.
Product planning?
Yeah, stage kind of software do you use?
Sure. So the question is, share some experience related to A/B testing and what kind of software that I use for product planning. So typically A/B testing or experimentation is done to validate whether, so think about what you have today is the current variation of a product, or is what we call control environment. And now you want to create another variation and say, if instead of asking these 10 questions on one page, what if I create 3 pages and split the questions, or have the questions come up based on the answer of the previous question and make it more intelligent, right? So that's another variation of the product that we just talked about. Now, if you want to test how is the new variation performing as compared to the original state of the product, you would do something called as an A/B testing. So you would call one thing as an A, the other variation as a B, and test. The other names of these things are, A here is control, and B is test. You would move some traffic to the variation, and you would try and test how that is performing, and you would try and measure your key KPIs or the KPI that you want to change. Now, with my experience around A/B testing has been less around the A/B testing, but more around ramping a certain product. So it has never been in terms of I'm launching a new variation. It has always been in terms of I'm launching this new feature. I don't want to launch it to 100% of the population on day one. So I have used experimentations and said, okay, first launch it to these 100 users that I identified through some criteria, right? And then I would measure their behavior and see how many people went through it. And measuring their behavior can be simple things like just data and trying to figure out number of people, number of successful transactions, to something called as behavioral analytics. Who went on page 1? What did they see? What did they click? Did they abandon on page 2? Where did they abandon? And things like that. So doing all of that and then doing an actual percentage-based ramp by saying, okay, These 100 users look okay. Ramp to 1%. See what happens. Everything looks fine. Ramp to 5, ramp to 10, 25, 50, and eventually 100. So I've had that kind of experience with the A/B testing. It is more of a product ramp instead of an A/B testing. But A/B testing can be done. The reason why I talked about A/B testing first is it's not, product ramp is just one use case. The actual use case of an A/B testing is to figure out what variation that you think about, the hypothesis that you have, is this even going to work or not? And you just put together a quick prototype, create a variation, send some traffic one way, and see what their behavior is.
So you mentioned threshold, right? So for example, just 5% of the total customer size. So like, then do you have a specific threshold? Like for example, the traffic upgrade 5% or 10% improvement, you're gonna eventually not gonna launch the feature. So what's your normal guideline for your experience? How you gonna manage those?
So that's a great question. So she's asking if there is a specific threshold beyond which you would say, if it deteriorates beyond this, I'm not going to go further, right? I'm going to ramp down. Is that what your question is?
Yeah, but normally how do you set up that internal metrics?
Okay. So the way how we set that internal metrics is, first, now you're even if you're doing A/B testing or ramping your product, you're trying to figure out what your key metrics are. So you would define what my key success metric is, right? If I am launching a new way to, one of the products that I launched at PayPal was a new way to get money out of your PayPal account. So I don't know how many of you use PayPal here. Okay. You guys would have seen, if you have noticed, that if you have money in your PayPal account, if you had to exit those funds to your bank account, now you could exit them faster by paying a little fee, right? That was the product that I developed. So I'm just taking that as an example. If you have to take that as an example, my key KPI is, or my key performance indicator is that the traffic on the website or the traffic for that money out should not reduce just because I launched this new feature, right? That's the most simple success metric for me. Conversion is my success metric, right? How many successful transactions I'm doing, right? The other things that I would think about it, okay, I should not have more than X number of abandonments. Now, how you come up with that metric? For a metric that you have never dealt with, if you've created a new flow, you don't know what the original abandonment rate is. So you can't have a relative, it should not drop by 5% kind of a situation. You should always have you will always have an absolute threshold and say, it should not drop. I shouldn't have more than 25% abandonments, right? For other metrics, you would actually see what the previous performance is, and sometimes your threshold is going to be equal to or better than the previous metric. Sometimes it's going to be, I can take a tolerance of 2% of deviation. More than that, it won't. You will have to make a judgment call as a product manager to say what works here, what I can take. Yeah. Also, one more thing to add is, when you are at lower percentages, again, it's more of a judgment call. The tolerance could go a little higher or lower because the lower percentages are not the right depiction of the overall population. So think about all of those things. Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up. But let's give her a hand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.